And I turned around and I'm like, I wonder what she's looking at. And she really wasn't looking at anything. She's just looking at me. And I said, Mom, what's going on? And she really looked at me square and said, what about your school, Luisa? What about your dream? And at that time, Hersh, I felt like I fell through the cold ice of a frozen lake.
Yeah.
It just hit me like 1,000 forces. And I said, Mom, look at me. Look how much I'm working. I don't know what to tell you, but I don't know if this is going to happen. And funny, she didn't say anything afterwards at all. Not that day, not until
What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't, and we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Hersh, and if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes.
My guest today on Truth Tastes Funny is Dr. Luissa K. She is a women's physician, an author, a motivational speaker, and a life coach, a daughter, wife, and mother, and a trauma survivor. Dr. Luissa is the author of the Amazon bestseller, Push, Then Breathe. And breathing comes in really handy. So does a really good sense of managing reality with a good sense of humor and a real love for life. Welcome, Dr. Luissa, to The Truth Tastes Funny.
Thank you, Hersh. I appreciate your invitation. I am very, very excited to be in your show today.
It's great to have you here. We've talked a little bit, before the show and other occasions, and it's really wonderful to have you on. Let's start with the book a little bit, just so the audience knows the origin of Push, Then Breathe.
Okay. So I started the book 37 years ago. Believe it or not, a couple of months after I came to the United States, I started jotting down some ideas, didn't really make it too far. At first, it was written, when I started, it was handwritten in Romanian. When I came to the United States, I did not speak any English, only spoke Romanian, German, and French. So then, after a very, very short effort, I put it away, tucked it in a box, and about 5 years ago, as you know, my life had just a little bit more of a break in its busyness. I started more and more thinking about it. Like, I think it's time to let these passions, bring up like some truth. And let's just use that to help people, not only, spiritually and through the mental wellness, but also because it comes together with what I do as a physician, as a women's doctor. So this is really how um, Push Then Breathe was born. I started first. It's just funny because, I'm one of those people who doesn't give up easily. Like I'm
Yeah.
a dog with a bone. So I said, I woke up one morning and I said to my husband, I said, you know what? I am going to start this and I'm going to record myself for 15 minutes every day. And this is how the book will just, take form. Well, that didn't last very long either. It took, because what happened is it just interfered with my lifestyle. I know it just sounds funny when I say that. It interfered with my lifestyle.
Yeah.
My lifestyle is that I get up at 5 in the morning, I work out, I have to run, I do my runs, and then I start work for my practice. So about a week afterwards, I said, well, I gotta figure out a different way. So again, this was 5 years ago, very, very long and many, many days and nights. It was just one of those journeys that you have to keep at it. And when you have a writer's block, you have to stop and don't get mad at yourself, don't get despaired, and get back, next day or a couple of days later. I did hire a book coach who helped me along. And in 2023, finally the book, got completed. It got accepted for publication, which was very, very exciting. And a year afterwards, in February 2024, it got published and released to the world in all formats. But you may wonder, what is this book all about? So I am a refugee from former communist Romania. I came here in the United States on a 2 month visit to get to meet and know my father. And that was my plan. My plan was to meet him, get to know him, get to see who's my father, right? And then go back home, go and take the medical school admission exam in Romania and go to medical school.
And let me stop you for a second, Luissa, because going to medical school had been a dream of yours since childhood, right?
Yes.
I mean, this was a plan.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
It was a plan since my 5th grade.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, go on. I wanted the audience to understand.
So only my father had extremely and widely different plans for me. He wanted me to stay here, and not only that, he used every single way and mean to force me to stay in this country. Now, again, you may say, well, what's wrong with this country? Well, it's nothing wrong with this country. It's the means that I was kept here. My whole family, my friends, my mother was still back home. That was not my plan. And when this happened, I was a month shy of being 19 years old. I was coerced into changing my name, take a different identity. I had to file for political asylum, which rendered me an enemy of the state because, again, I had to give a declaration that I was persecuted in Romania. And then again, my name was changed. And then after I was accepted to stay here, my passport was taken, full dependence, physical and financial. And that lasted together with mental, physical, and psychological abuse for 6 years and 8 months.
Yeah. Now, and how did that transpire? Like when I hear that, it's hard to imagine that happening, obviously, that you finally come to meet your father and it devolves into a traumatic experience. What was the progression of that, I guess?
So in the beginning, I want to, we here in the medical field, we talk about the 7 stages of grief. And not only, cancer patients or patients who are, placed in face of, hey, you got so many more weeks or months, or even a couple of years to live. That is actually happens through a traumatized person, abused person, trafficked person, and they are shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and hope. So as an imprisoned young woman, I had gone through all 7 of them. And you're going to probably wonder, how did I remain sane? It is an extremely hard journey to travel. You have to, because think about the statistics. Most statistics, the vast majority of people who go through this, actually they end up in a very, very unfortunate, bad situation for one reason or another. And I credit a lot of my strength to my first 18 years in Romania, that I had a lot of love. I had a lot of support. I was the belle of the ball. My mom, my grandparents, and my very close family and relatives always were unshakable support. And that when I came here, I had nothing. It's just like, just imagine yourself, Hersh. If I take you, we're going to trip, right? And all of a sudden, when we get there, you don't speak the language, you don't know anybody in this country, everything is stripped away from you. You have no way to know where you are. You have no passport. You have no means to get to the embassy, and you are imprisoned. And what are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
So just think about it for 1 minute. What would go through your head, right? And that is what's happened with me. In the beginning, I was extremely, extremely depressed. I was shocked. Like I said, it's just like a dream. You're like, okay, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and it's going to be different. I'm sure this is just a dream. And then you realize as days go by and months go by that really this is just what's happening. This is you live with an abuser. You have very few means to hang on to that keeps you sane. And mine was my past, was my mother. She continued to be from thousands of miles away, a huge supporter and advocate. I used to have, you're going to laugh at this, 59 seconds on Sunday morning to talk to my mom.
So you were in contact. You were allowed to have because I was going to ask what your mom was doing and what your family was doing. So to the outside world, what did this appear that you had requested? Obviously, kind of sanctuary, political asylum, right. But what was your mother perceiving?
So nobody knew the truth. The only thing my mother knew that I have decided to stay here to further my education and become a doctor. My father threw a lot of lies at me and deceit. One of them was that he promised me he will remarry my mother and bring her over so we can be a family again. The second was that he will help me go to medical school and become a doctor. Okay. And none have been kept. None of these promises have ever been kept.
Right.
The first one I found out when I got my green card. Actually, when I applied for political asylum, he led me into the truth that he never really intended to do that. The second, it took about 6 years because he would just remember, I'm from a communist country. I'm from a country whose anything economically, socially, politically, even going to medical school, the system is completely different. And I have no means to know what's what. So if you say to me, Hersh, hey, I'm going to help you become a doctor. 37 years ago, I would have believed you. I'm like, well, you know the system, right?
Yeah. Right.
I don't know the system. I believe you. You're my father. Well, 6 years into the making, my father actually told my mother when my mother approached him and said, what have you done for my daughter? All these years, she stayed there because you promised her to become a physician. And he really said she will make just a very good secretary.
Oh.
That is when I found out.
Yeah. And there were these weekly calls, you said 59 seconds, like just under a minute. And and what transpired in the 1 minute exchanges with your mom?
Just platonic conversation. How are you doing? How is everything going? What did you do, this week? I mean, what can you speak in 59 seconds?
Yeah.
But there is a reason why it's 59 seconds. So in the past, I don't know if it's now because obviously I don't.
Yeah,
I don't do this.
The tracking of the call.
Yes, and if you hang up before 59 seconds, you can actually know. You can also ask credit to the phone company. He would not. He was very, very cheap. He would not allow me otherwise to call. So when we get the statement, I would have to make a phone call to the telephone company and say, hey, it's a communist country. The connection was bad, and I had to redial or just disconnect. Please give me credit. In this way, he had no, he had no power over me when I would say, I want to call my mother. I need to call my mother and see how she's doing. And he cannot say that I am spending his money. But I tell you, that is PTSD in itself, because every Sunday morning, as I would wake up, I knew I had to put this show on. And just the thought of it, I would just start having cold sweats and like really going. I was in panic. Oh my God, what if I say something I shouldn't? What if, because he was listening to the conversations? What about if I can't do it? I mean, just because we'd have constant fights, even about these phone calls.
Yeah. So this is going on and you're coping with it and you go through those stages, which makes sense. We often forget about those 7 stages. And then how did you finally get out?
So, like, recall I said that he talked to my mother about the fact that he will
Oh,
never help
that
me
he
become.
that you would be a good secretary. Right. Yeah.
So, I actually went home. I went home for 5 days that November in 1993.
Hmm.
And I talked to my mom, and she gave me a small monetary gift. It was $1,000 cash, which in Romania at that time was a great deal of money. And she gave it to me and she said, I want you to take this because you never know what life throws at you. And then she told me that my father has no intention to help me get, because my idea was I'm going to go to medical school, I'm going to become a doctor, I'm going to escape this hell. That was my plan because I was in no man's land. Think about it. I couldn't have gone back home to Romania. I really had no means to take care of myself here because all the money that I was making, I was working 2 jobs at a time. It was taken and directly by him. I did have an allowance. It was $1 a week.
So you were trapped in many ways. You weren't
Right.
a prisoner in the sense of being locked up
Mm-hmm.
in the home, but you had no recourse. You had become
Right.
dependent on your father and the circumstances that were created. It's very much like someone who's blindfolded and
Mm-hmm.
spun around in a circle and then put in another country, in another environment, in another set of circumstances where they have no advantages in
Exactly.
that situation. And so even when you were able to visit your mother, there wasn't much you could do,
Yeah.
really. Yeah, I understand. And so your mother gave you this money to help.
Yes. And then
Um,
I came back home. Everything was so, I mean, and it's really spelled out in my book, Hersh. I mean, it's just the cunning personality of this monster. It was just amazing. It's just that narcissistic type of person that everything was spinning about his personal gain, personal pleasure, and how would he use me? Because, I was like a tool.
yeah,
I had, there was no way. There's the way you don't have to bind somebody in chains. All you have to do is, economically, no, you don't have, she doesn't have any money. She doesn't have no means to create a credit. I heard this so many times that without me, you are nothing. So
yeah.
So you asked me, how did I escape? So on December 3rd, 1993, I finally got my citizenship, my American citizenship. And he himself went to Romania for a week. And during that time, so I was by myself during my citizenship. I was extremely happy to be by myself and really celebrate. That was my first true accomplishment in the United States. Now I was someone. I was a citizen. I belonged somewhere.
Hmm.
And then I had $1,000. I was working, like I said, in a grocery store. I was a manager, a front desk manager. And then also I was working for his company. He had a real estate company. So when he left, I proceeded to go look for it, talk to my boss and say, I need full-time hours. Can I get full-time hours? I applied for another job. He said, yes, you can get as many hours as you want. My best friend, Kim, she was extremely instrumental. I didn't have friends, so the only friend I had was this woman who I befriended at the grocery store. She worked with me. So she didn't know, again, anything. Nobody knew anything.
Yeah.
Nobody except my cat. That is the only other being like alive that was allowed around me. So Kim helped me, drove me around. I found an apartment. I went and I found a car from a dealership. I put part of the $1,000, I put money down, and I tell you, this was a miracle because I had no credit. Every time I applied a couple of times and they turned me down because really it looked like I had no income and I couldn't make credit. I couldn't have a credit because I didn't have a credit card, but then I couldn't have a credit card because I didn't have credit. So, that whole
Right.
chasing your tail kind of thing.
Yeah.
So really, I was blessed to have these breaks, to be able to get an apartment, to be able to get a loan for this secondhand car. That's all I needed. A transportation to go back and forth from work and a place to live. And then I moved out.
Yeah. Extraordinary. Now comes an incredible part of the story where you decide, okay, now I'm going to go to medical school and become a doctor. So tell us a little bit about that.
I have to say that like everything else that we go through in life, when we escape, we don't just walk away from a situation like
Right.
we run, right? So when I came out of this, I was just so pumped up. Okay, I'm finally taking, hold of my life. I will do exactly what I want to do. I will make it happen. I'm going to become a doctor. And then I got a second job, I got a third job, and I was working around the clock. But guess what? We think that we can then, with all that power and energy, we can actually achieve this leap and make it all happen. And then is when life gets in the way
Mm-hmm.
because the bills, life, the
Mm-hmm.
bills, the work. I mean, you got to sleep, you got to function. So about a year into it, I just working and doing and surviving really. The only thing I could do at that point is invite my mom. My mom never came to the United States before that. Now that I was an American citizen, I could invite her here and to visit me. And I brought her over. Without realizing, my dream was taking a second or maybe a third place. And I really refused thinking about it. I think it's just giving up. I was still, what became like a distant, you know how it becomes like a distant vision that you can still see it, but becomes more and more blurry. And she came in November. We spent Thanksgiving together. And I want to share this with you and the listeners because it's always, and it is in the book, this part, it always gets me very emotional. We were walking from the Thanksgiving Mass that day, and it was in Manchester, New Hampshire, and it was cold and snowy. And we're just, making small talk there, walking the path. And at one point, she stopped. And I turned around and I'm like, I wonder what she's looking at. And she really wasn't looking at anything. She's just looking at me. And I said, Mom, what's going on? And she really looked at me square and said, what about your school, Luissa? What about your dream? And at that time, Hersh, I felt like I fell through the cold ice of a frozen lake.
Yeah.
It just hit me like 1,000 forces. And I said, Mom, look at me. Look how much I'm working. I don't know what to tell you, but I don't know if this is going to happen. And funny, she didn't say anything afterwards at all. Not that day, not until she left back. But that moment, I just woke up and I realized that I was letting the very thing that kept me alive and sane all these years slip away from me.
Yeah.
And that day, I chose to take ownership of my dream, to move from feeling, hopeless and helpless to feeling empowered and say, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have to do this. So in January, she left in January 95. A month later, I applied to get enrolled into undergrad. So I went to UMass in Lowell. I got accepted there for my bachelor. I finished my bachelor in 2 years. While still working, I just holler ass. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I took a year off to study for my MCAT and actually beef up my resume. I worked in Boston in research, and you'd be like, okay, so how did you get the money? Well, I heard about the military actually helping students get scholarships to go to medical school. And I went to the Air Force, applied. Of course, I had to first get the MCAT out of the way. I had to also get accepted to a medical school. So after I did get accepted to not one, but I got accepted to five of them, the Air Force gave
Wow.
me a full ride through medical school.
Oh, wow.
It's like
Wow.
a movie.
It is. It is indeed. And it's both kind of shattering, to consider that you went through that stuff, but also inspiring that you were able to do it. And who knows if your mom hadn't stopped you, hadn't stopped in the street, and that's the power sometimes of a parent who can just say the right thing at the right moment and just cause you to kind of snap out of that malaise, basically, and think, okay, what was the point again? What was the purpose again? So you got accepted into 5 medical schools. You joined the Air Force. So how long were you in the Air Force? 3 years or something?
So total, I was in the Air Force for 12.
12 years. Okay, so you stayed in the service.
Right. So what I did my medical school, then I did a military residency. I chose to do that. I really, really, I'm forever going to be indebted and grateful to the Air Force for really giving me the chance. Because what I want to say here is you have to remember that you're not alone in this world, and it's okay to lean on to your friends, to your community, to ask for help. And I remember when the Air Force recruiter asked me, I asked him actually, and I said, "Do you think I'm going to get this?" And he says, "Well, if they only look at this or this, probably they won't. But if they look at you as a whole applicant, as a whole person, that what you can and are bringing to the table, then you will get it." And that is what's important. I mean, nobody's perfect, but the Air Force looked at me as a whole person, as what I can bring. What does this person brings to the table? To make that community and what she wants to do a better place. So
Yeah.
again, that is my second huge accomplishment. What in the United States was to get the health profession scholarship program. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I feel like there's a whole every time that we go through it, and we've spoken, but we kind of saved, I think, some stuff for this interview because, if we talked about everything and everything that's in your book when we had spoken the last time, it would be kind of anticlimactic. But wow, even knowing where you are and your story in a nutshell, the journey is so full and so momentous. It's like now because I know what's coming, in the interest of time a little bit, and I do encourage people to read the book Push Then Breathe, which is an Amazon bestseller. But speaking of push, then breathe, let's talk about your specialization as a doctor and what's behind that and your decision to specialize in high risk pregnancies.
So, I wanted to become a doctor 15 years into my journey, my first 15 years. The book actually ends with my graduation from medical school. Just that as a caveat. Again, I don't want to give it away. I never walked my graduation.
Okay.
And I will leave it that way. Again, you know how life throws you monkey wrenches? I think I'm the
Yes,
queen.
yeah.
So instead, I have very, very high risk pregnancies, okay, myself. So I already knew that I'm going to become an OBGYN by the time the book wraps up. But I really didn't know that I had such an interest in high risk pregnancies. So, after residency, during residency, but even my payback to the Air Force, I became so much interested in not only women's health, but pregnancies, the obstetrics part, which is my specialty. It's high risk pregnancy or maternal and fetal medicine, because I really, really believe this is my calling, taking care of both the mother and the fetus together. I did go back and I did a fellowship in maternal and fetal medicine for 3 years after I paid back my debt to the Air Force. And then afterwards, when I got out, spent 10 years practicing MFM and being leadership, being a program director, corporate director, both in Indiana and in Texas. And right after COVID, I was the head of a huge practice here in San Antonio, about 52 employees, when the private organization started having financial difficulties and started closing practices, and ours was slotted for a closure. And in September 2022, we parted ways, the practice closed. And it really affected me because I took a huge interest on it, really in making the practice amazing, but also helping in taking care of the pregnant women here in San Antonio. And so in October 2022, I had made the decision that, you know what, I can still be an MFM without being employed. And I opened my own practice. So my practice is Telemed MFM, which is telemedicine, telemed, and then MFM from maternal fetal medicine. It is 100% consultative and 100% telehealth. I work full time. I have contracts, national contracts that honor, and I practice clinical medicine. My practice, my actually clinic is on the ground. Everybody is on the ground. It's just like you would walk in a regular, medical office. It's the only person that's virtual is me.
Yeah. And I found that fascinating that because with telemedicine, it always comes up. I mean, it came up during COVID, it comes up now. They still do telemed visits. And there are
Yes.
certain things that the doctor can do and certain things that have to be done on site. And
Yep.
you're covering, both sides of it. And at the same time, your expertise and everything that you've accomplished and the accumulation of all of these gifts and skills are not limited to one physical space. And you can treat people anywhere, and you have a physical practice there that you attend virtually, and then you can attend, you can treat patients anywhere in the world, essentially. But tell us a little bit now about your vision for what comes next.
So through my skill as physician, I help women, I help my patients heal organically, for them to regain their health, to have a happy and healthy pregnancy, to really live a fulfilled, a healthy life with their babies. Through my book, In my empowerment platform, I help women find their inner resources and how to find their true, unlimited potential, and not only live life, but thrive in life. Because we are more than just living life or surviving. We want to thrive. And that, this is, my target audience is wide and vast. Yes, I'm looking at the Gen Z females looking for empowerment, the millennial females seeking freedom, but also to the trauma survivors, the trafficked women and men, the young people who had a very abused childhood, because all of them, my audience, through my teachings and through my journey and through my own overcoming of my past, will become empowered and inspired to build really the life they always wanted. That is my future dream. That is my next dream to want to accomplish. And it's interesting how life kind of got this organic part of healing and emotional part of healing together. It's just like blending them in such a beautiful, beautiful piece of art.
Very well said, because, and I want to call attention to your website, Dr. Luissa K, Luissa with two S's, and it'll all be in the show notes. But drluissak.com has the kind of combined power and potency of what you were just talking about, where it's more than medicine, it's organic, it's emotional, mental, the entire being of a person that needs care and sensitivity. And I think that, we've talked about this as well. I think there's tremendous room to grow still, with everything you've accomplished. And I don't know, and I assume that when you were young, when you were in fifth grade and you knew you wanted to go into medicine, you didn't foresee even exactly what you're doing now,
Correct.
and our journeys make us, who we are, and what you are and who you are is a testament to, your determination and resilience and brilliance and sensitivity. And I would also like to have you on our Yes Brand podcast, which focuses on business, because I think it would be great to talk about the telemedicine, the kind of a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of it, and also the way you're carrying kind of dual brands. You have the Dr. Luissa brand and you have your Telemed MFM. And I think that for we have audience that listens to both of the shows. And this is one of those situations where I think it would make a great episode to continue this conversation, because I also want to just keep continuing the conversation. It's very fascinating to me and very inspiring for the audience, I'm sure. So hopefully you will come back and be on the Yes Brand podcast as well.
Well, I thank you for the invite, and I will definitely consider it. And you put it so nicely and really truly how the two brands, and 20 years ago, 30 years ago, obviously I was not even thinking what am I today and how things come together today. It's very interesting, and I sometimes just stop and ponder and think. Somebody asked me, says, what's next? I said, I'm not sure. I let the future kind of show me, where to go, guide me. I think it's important to listen, but also allow, just for a minute, stop and just allow things to unfold. And they take you in very, beautiful but unexpected paths. I just believe that it's, we hit Hersh, we were talking right before the show, how truth tastes funny. And I want to say that because I never thought of a sentence like that until I met your show and until I met you. And it makes me smile because I started using it in my vocabulary and people are like, that makes sense. I said, yeah. And actually you have to start having a taste for it. You have to accept it. It has to grow in you to embrace truth. But there are no mistake. Truth always comes out, just like oil. It can be suppressed, but it never can stay there in the deep.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.